This time on Watchers of Tomorrow, his Star Trek will go on forever.
Hello everyone, welcome to Watchers of Tomorrow, the sci-fi review critique show that's putting the humanities back into science fiction. I am Gep, and I'm joined as always by my friend and co-host Dr. Izix.
Hi.
And this week we're doing something a little bit different because, as anyone who's been listening to this show knows, if you just found this episode, go back and listen to another one because this probably isn't a good one to start with.
Because we're kind of at the end of some things before we start something new.
Yeah, we just finished all of Star Trek, the original series.
All of it.
All something episodes.
Like 79, was it? Or I forget the exact name.
Yeah,
number.
I pulled up the page. I was hoping that it would say Wikipedia has failed me. Oh, wait, 79 episodes. There we go.
Hey, I was right. Cool. I win the internet, right?
I will be honest, I feel lost because we usually just have, we do the synopsis, and then we talk about the things, but this is just what we thought of the series as a whole.
So, I guess the question is, what did we think of the series as a whole?
See, this is the very first time that I, a very long-term Star Trek fan, have actually sat down and watched all of original series.
And, I think until this watch through, I had not seen every single episode, and of those that I had seen previously, it'd been so many years. It's might as well just be a fresh start anyway.
Yeah, I'd only seen a handful, and the movies. I think the thing that really struck me is just how weirdly inconsistent this show is.
There's some weeks some folks are sort of this sort of characterization, other weeks of this characterization. But this is also kind of a problem that shows up in later Star Trek as well, even all the way through the TNG era and all that. And it's like, all right, I guess this is just kind of a side effect maybe of serialized writing, maybe.
Maybe. It wasn't quite as much later. If you look at TNG, which we're going to soon-ish, the first season, they don't know what they're doing yet. But after the second season, you basically know what every character's going to do.
You kind of get the general vibe.
You don't usually get that out of left field thing like you do. This, you don't even... See, the thing is, there were certain episodes on other shows where every now and then you have a weird episode and you go oh, that character's not acting the way that they normally do. That's weird. This show, every episode, no one's acting the way they normally do because there's no normal way they act.
Yeah, it's just never pinned down quite right. Well, maybe they're just every single episode's in a parallel universe. So throw all canon in the garbage and we're fine.
So it's just so strange that it doesn't have a consistent tone, particularly, which is fine. They're trying different things in most episodes. It doesn't have consistent writing because there's 4 or 5 particularly good episodes, and they're the ones that anyone's ever heard of.
And those tend to be from the kick-ass writers, and then they eventually kind of start vanishing from the show.
And that's about it. They don't have good... the characters are inconsistent. The world seems wildly inconsistent. The way anything functions is wildly inconsistent, which I don't care that much about. You don't have to base everything on some sort of hard research science-y stuff, but when you're pulling random things that the ship can do out of the air every episode, it becomes a little difficult to get invested in what's going on.
Yeah, so we're going to tech our way out of here, and presto, we've survived. Hooray! Kind of makes that whole, what was the right term? Captain, help me here. I'm dying.
I'm not sure what you're trying to get at.
The weight, the stakes. There we go. The stakes
there you
suddenly aren't really there ever because you have this sort of terrible pattern of we'll figure it out and then we'll get back to status quo again next week and everything will be fine. Which is kind of a problem in a lot of Star Trek, again all the way through at least the TNG era, especially in Voyager, where you have like, all right, so last week half the ship was blown up and a bunch of people died, and then next week, well, everything's fine. There's no damage anywhere on the ship, and no one's really thinking about all the people that just died. So, hooray!
Well, the thing with, especially since it was episodic, you run into that problem. But I think the main difference with, like, 80s to 90s Star Trek is it's a drama series more than it's trying to be like hard sci-fi or any other stuff. So it's way more about the character interactions and what they're doing with each other and how they're figuring out problems and whether they should figure out a problem. Most of the time on something like Voyager or Next Gen, they either like just need to buy enough time to figure out the problem, or they already know the solution to the problem, and the problem is whether or not it's morally right to do the solution to the problem.
And I will say that in the original series here, they do try to have a lot of character sort of stuff coming in here, but with that lack of consistency, it kind of undoes itself every once in a while, and it's like, you had something going good there for a while, and then suddenly, And so I guess the character arcs for what they are in the series are pretty weak, because they wanted to be a bit more on the sci-fi end of things, but were much better at the character stuff, and so didn't do either one super well.
Yeah, this is a monster of the week show with no monsters.
Yep. Occasionally monsters. Sometimes
monsters, but everyone describes it as like what crazy thing are they going to run into this time? But they don't run into anything that crazy.
Yeah, this isn't Farscape.
I mean, it's really difficult for me to know because I didn't grow up with TV of this era. I know that Star Trek is basically a massive departure from how other television of the era was or even functioned. So I can't really compare it. Like, if this may have been just like, oh my god, look at that thing, this is amazing, compared to everything else on TV at the time. I think it does wind up with kind of the aliens problem. Like, I've heard people talk about this. Like, if you go back now and you haven't seen Aliens, the movie, and you watch Aliens, it feels really cookie cutter, and because everything that came out after it copied it so much.
It's been hurt by its own success.
Mm.
And yeah.
So we might be running into that kind of problem coming at it from such a later lens that any innovative thing that it actually did is like so rote standard to modern audiences that you just like can't even notice it.
And especially since, Star Trek has continued. There has been numerous Star Trek series after that where they basically start with the basic premise and copy it over. And it's like, well, each time we kind of need to win over the previous fans. So we're going to have something that's very Star Trek-y about, from the previous generation Star Trek. And so you get sort of elements that kind of propagate through. And so this, a lot of the stuff that would, seem, new and fresh for the 60s, we're already super used to. Yeah.
But you mentioned characters. So I think if we're going to talk about the original series, you have to talk about the big three, who supposedly their amazing character interactions are what everyone loves about this show.
You're talking about Scotty, Sulu, and Chapel, right?
Yeah, and they're like the emotional heart of the show, and their interactions together.
No, we're actually talking about Kirk, Spock, and McCoy.
Now you have me think. I can't remember if they're definitely never all three on screen at the same time. I'm trying to remember if Chapel was ever in the room with Scotty.
I'm pretty sure she was kind of like maybe background a couple of times when Scotty was in sick bay, but that's kind of about it.
Yeah. I just can't remember if she was there in the Lights of Zetar or not.
Well, I guess we could pause the recording and check that out, but I don't really feel like it.
Yeah,
so.
But why? So yeah, you have the brotastic trio, Kirk, McCoy, and Spock. I don't understand what their dynamic is supposed to be, because it does change a lot. I guess you're supposed to have like the two old friends, the old doctor who's like telling the young friend captain advice. He almost never goes to him for advice, except maybe once. And, like, it's hard to tell how much older than him he's supposed to be.
I'm going to say at least a decade. But I guess more often McCoy comes to Kirk and says, hey, you're done screwing up, cut it out.
Yeah, and then Kirk goes, shut up, I'm the captain, screw you.
And then he might think about it, he might not, depends on the episode.
Yeah.
And you got Kirk and Spock over there, and Kirk's like, I need information, and tell me how to fix the problem of the week.
Yeah, they're supposed to just sort of be the Kirk's completely led by emotion and Spock's not. Mm-hmm. But it's very, very... The show really cannot decide episode to episode, or even often in the same episode, whether emotion is good or not.
It's hims and haws, and it kind of comes down to, again, probably what the writer's feeling like that day, which is frustrating, honestly. Because if you're trying to make a point for one or the other, then okay, that's fine. But if you're trying to have it kind of both ways, you just kind of, I don't know, annoy the viewer for after a while. Though I guess there is maybe something to be said about, this being a struggle that is something that we as people are having to face, and it's just never going to be resolved. I guess that's maybe something to take out of it.
But they're not exactly doing any of the things. They've never done this well. There was a line in an episode of Voyager that I remember that I really wish they'd done something with the idea. Because you have Captain Janeway talking to Tuvok, and he says something about how it's only logical. And she says, that's the great thing about logic, you can use it to justify anything.
To a certain degree, yeah. Depends on what you set up as your initial premises and what sort of decisions you want to make as far as progressing forward in the logical structures and so on and so forth. And so you can kind of generate a logical pathway that gets you to where you want to be, kind of depending on what your alternative motivations are. And so to declare that, all logic will lead to a singular truth at all times is a little ridiculous, because that's not how people actually, including Vulcan.
Yeah, the Vulcans never do that. And I do think that I was very disappointed in how they're supposed to be all friends and buddy-buddy. And actually, I had seen all of the original Star Trek movies long before I saw any of the show, because when I was growing up, it was just easier to find the movies.
It's like, some of them are like in theaters right now, so let's go watch it. Or, they're coming out on VHS tape and things like that. Because we're old, you see, and this was before things like DVDs were even a thing.
Yeah, like my mom was a Trek fan. She's the one who got me into it originally. So she had the movies on tape, but back then, if you wanted to have, they didn't even offer most full series on VHS tape. And if you wanted them, they were ridiculously expensive. Only one tape could only hold like 2 to 3 episodes, depending.
And so basically you now have to fill up an entire shelf's worth of space in your home with like $500 worth of videotape. And there's your series.
Yeah. So series weren't really a thing back then.
No, I have, I think, seen a couple full shelves like that now that I think about it. But, not usually owned by individuals.
So coming into this, I was used to the movies, and the movies, as we'll get into later, they do have a somewhat mildly antagonistic friend relationship. They don't in the show. Like, that they all hate each other.
To varying degrees, yes. Especially the McCoy-Spock interaction.
Yeah, the McCoy-Spock thing, they loathe each other and can't stand being around each other, and there's like the interactions are explicitly racist, and the ones with Kirk and Spock are not much better. He's less explicitly racist.
Yeah, it's more subtle there. Though I will say that over the course of the series, McCoy does mellow out, but still there's a bit of sting there. So
again, it really depends on the episode.
Like, oh.
Like, sometimes he's not doing it at all, and sometimes it's the core of the episode, and sometimes he uses it to solve the puzzle of what's going on.
Yeah, I guess the best moments I can say as far as their interactions go is I forget which one was like, yeah, McCoy's like kind of like, yeah, if you go do this, you're gonna get yourself killed. So and I don't want that to happen. And Spock's like, I understand, or something like that. And it's like, oh, all right. So there is an appreciation for Spock from McCoy here, despite all the bluster and awfulness. But it's sort of very much under the hood as opposed to the explicit sort of top level stuff.
It just makes me feel like Friends were a very, very different thing in the 60s.
People, cultures do evolve and change over time. And to say that we, how we interact today is 100% how people interacted, even 10, 20 years ago is a little absurd when you think about it. Even just on the very small stuff, strip away all the technology and all that as well, and how people just sort of talk to each other is going to change over time. Mm. So that might be an aspect. So,
yeah, there's not the thing is, there's just so little depth in the characters. I think overall, Scotty's probably the only competent person on the entire ship. We've said that several times.
I think the competency levels go Scotty, Uhura, Spock, Chekhov if he's not horny, and then everyone else.
Yeah. It was also weird. So I was just having this conversation. How strange it is. Like, the characters aren't super well written most of the time. They aren't very consistently written. Spock's probably the best written character, and then Scotty, because his entire character trait is that he has an accent.
He has an accent, and so they get that right. And I guess James Doohan is just like, well, I kind of know how to play Scotty, then, well, I'll just kind of roll with the script, and I'll do my best to be consistent, so it works.
And then I was thinking about it, I'm like, well, James Doohan's like probably one of the better actors on the show. You have Leonard Nimoy, who's an incredibly good actor, and James Doohan is a good actor. And I'm like, well, I didn't like McCoy, but DeForest Kelley is a really good actor. He just wasn't given anything to work with. It's
like, all right, you're going to be just kind of belligerent all the time. It's like, well, I can do belligerent, I'm kind of an old Western sort of, actor. I can do that, but is that all?
So then I was thinking about it, and like, the only bad actor on the show is Shatner. Yeah. And for some reason, he's both the worst written and characterized character and the worst actor. And for some reason, he gets to headline the show. Did he have dirt on Roddenberry?
No. You see, he was a white guy.
There were a lot of those around.
Well, yeah, but he was at the right age too. He wasn't young like Chekhov, and Walter Koenig there. He wasn't a little older like DeForest Kelley. He was right there in the sweet spot.
Yeah, he and Nimoy are the same age. Actually, almost exactly. That's interesting. They were only born like 4 days apart.
That's a little weird. Wait,
yeah.
Are they clones of each other? That doesn't make any sense. Never mind.
No, it doesn't. Not at all. Not even a little bit.
So, I guess we also poked a little bit like at the the absurdity of some of the tech and things like that's been sort of established. And I am kind of amused that there's just so much power creep throughout the series too that it's kind of laughable. It's like, early on it's like Warp 1 is like fast as we feel like we're safe to go most of the time, and then suddenly Warp 5 is like, oh, we're going all in to chase these guys down, and then by the end of the series it's like suddenly we're traveling at warp 10 billion or something like that.
Well, this is something that I did kind of appreciate. This show doesn't know how anything works and doesn't care and doesn't think you should either.
And to a certain degree, I'm A-okay with that, because if what you're trying to do isn't to explain a universe that is, self-consistent, but to tell stories, that's fine, actually.
Yeah, like, when is the show set? Yeah. No one knows.
Some start date,
how far is anything apart? No one knows. Can you explore the entire galaxy? It sounds like it.
You can leave the galaxy randomly, even if by accident, so yeah.
Yeah, a lot. A lot you can leave the galaxy.
And and there's sometimes a barrier there that hampers your efforts. Sometimes there's not. Sometimes you get psychic powers. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes there's Cthulhu aliens that are like pretending to be humans taking you out of the galaxy, and other times you actually get the cosmic horror aliens to help you get back to the galaxy. It's all fine.
And I can really respect that, especially with how lore and canon focused everything is now. Because so I saw this thing ages ago. They were criticizing the last season of Game of Thrones, which I stopped watching that show half a season in. So, say what you will with it. But
it has its moments, but yeah.
They were complaining about how all of a sudden distances stopped being a concern. It's like they used to be like, oh, it'll take us a month to get wherever. Now, episode to episode, they're like all the way across the world. It's like either you're writing, like people are writing these stories. Like this is decisions that people are making outside of the world of the show. So if you want a character to get from point A to point B, you either say it takes as long as it takes, or you put point A and point B closer together. It doesn't really matter. The character needs to be in one place or another, and whether, like, if you need them to not get there for a certain amount of time, you're going to do that. But they're going to get there whenever the story dictates they get there. So worrying about this whole, well, how long does it take to get places? And why did the Klingon homeworld suddenly wind up so much closer in Enterprise than it was in Next Gen? It's like, who cares? It takes people as long to get places as it takes people. It's a story.
To try to codify an exact geometry of the galaxy in Star Trek is a fool's errand. Don't even bother.
Terry Pratchett used to have a thing at the back of all of his books that said, map of the world. You cannot map an imagination.
There we go. It's like, for our plot today, we're going to say this is so far from here, and then we're good to go. And, there's going to be these features somewhere in the world, and they are this sort of position relative to each other, maybe, unless we don't need them to be, in which case we'll change it. So that's fine. So I guess to a certain degree, we should basically suggest to folks that if you're going to be super bent out of shape about Star Trek canon at any point in time, maybe just chill.
See, the thing is that I don't think people understand, and you can speak to this more because you are an actual writer.
No, I'm trying to be.
But when you have something like that, like it takes you 3 years to get from Earth to wherever, that's a limitation that you're setting yourself in the story that you're using to write interesting things around. The limitation is arbitrary. You've just set yourself a rule so that you have to follow it and you can't just magic people around. But it's a challenge for the writer, which usually produces, better work in the end, but it's arbitrary.
This actually reminds me a little of a discussion I had with a writer named Mary Elode. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. She has a series of sci-fi novels that take place in a sort of alternative reality solar system sort of situation. And there is and the first stories actually very much have it takes time to get between different bodies in the star system. And so, part of the plot is that it's like, okay, we're going to be on this journey for so many months. And, we might be in a hurry, but it's still going to take us 5 months to get there. And hopefully we can figure out our plans and things like that well before then. But in the later stories, it's like, then we have development of new technology that lets us basically get around that problem. And that's how the world works now. And, that's something you can sort of do if you're trying to have this very, consistent sort of structure, is to actually have your world change like that. And that's also another option as far as, kind of just hand waving it away. It's like, okay, if people are going to be concerned about, crazy canon and all the sort of mathematics of the geometries, then that's one option. But Star Trek is just like, we're not going to worry about it. So they don't.
I keep getting reminded of this. It's a whole essay that you can find, but I was reading Ursula K. Le Guin's Left Hand of Darkness. It's a really, really good book, and she has a very amazing introductory essay to it that I recommend people find. It's way too long to read on this.
It's a paraphrase.
the gist of it, the piece that I really, really liked was basically science fiction authors should not concern themselves with extrapolation, because that's not what you're there for. You're there to write a metaphor about how people are now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you're extrapolating, it's boring, which is why I've constantly said that in different things when people go like, oh, look how much this inspired whatever the hell, or look how they predicted the rise of smartphones. Like, I don't care. They also thought that you'd be eating colorful food cubes. Like, that hasn't happened. You just ignore the stuff that doesn't work out and go, oh my god. But
get some things right, but it's not going to get everything right, so don't worry about it.
So the central metaphor that Star Trek wanted to be, it wasn't trying to be predictive. It wasn't like, here's how spaceships are going to be. It was, this is the world that we could have if we let go of nationalism and a bunch of other things. The problem is that it didn't turn anything particularly good, because I don't know, it was like half done. It was, we have people of different nationalities and races all being on the ship and no one cares, which I understand was pretty weird for the time. But everything else was bad.
It was still very much attached to the general ways of thinking of the time, even as it broke certain aspects of that, broke the shackles there, and was able to push forward on in sort of a new sort of paradigm. You can, I guess, to a certain degree, then you have to sort of, note, even, as far as like current science fiction productions, is that there is going to always be something that is going to attach you to that point in time. And so what you create is going to be reflective of that, no matter how hard you try to sort of, dream of your better world. Because, because Le Guin's quite right, because, you are going to be talking about something that is very much relevant to that point in time that you are existing in now, if you like it or not, though.
Well, the thing is, it's there, and you either just let it be, like I think Star Trek did. Just like American exceptionalism seeps in, the racism seeps in. You just like let it be there and don't pay any attention to it. Or you actively use it and comment on it. You say, yeah, this is still here, but what does that mean when we, separate it from the world so you can actually look at it and examine it? Or you take it and subvert it and go like, this is a show specifically about how the world will be if we do completely get rid of racism. But we have to actually sit down. The thing is, they wanted to write that, but they didn't actually take the time to sit down and understand what racism is and how it functions and how it affects society and what it looks like if you remove that. They just said, we're going to have people who are not white on the crew.
Which is a good first step, but you need more than that.
Yeah. We are done now.
Which I guess is, once again, kind of, this is how the thinking of the time very much was. That, just being specifically not horribly racist was good enough, as opposed to understanding the underlying dynamics and, the problems and the hidden aspects of racism that are not so easily noticed when you got, where most of the explicit, visions of it is actually, things like lynchings and, voter suppression and, people being shot in the street because of the color of their skin. These very heavily, overt, signs of racism do make it harder to understand and see the less overt and obvious ones.
Yeah, and they were able to get around some of that. And the thing is, the weird thing is they didn't have, they had a couple of really weirdly racist things in the show, like the whole exchange with Lincoln in Savage Curtain. And they demonstrate, anytime they actually try to talk about it, they demonstrate they don't know what they're talking about. But they usually don't talk about it, which I see the argument for, because if you're saying that this world has evolved beyond racism and everything's just normal, why would anyone comment on it? It's not weird. Except they're still super racist to anyone who's not human.
Still that paranoia of the other.
Which seems to just, it's just constantly undermining any point they're trying to make, which was so strange.
I guess it's maybe sort of draws a circle around in a weird sort of way of that there is very much different sort of, I guess, try not to say degrees of racism because that doesn't make any sense. But the in group of what you sort of define is part of your sort of quote tribe or whatever does change depending on the context of the society you're working in. Because though it's not much of a thing anymore, there was a time in the U.S. where if you were say Polish or Irish, there was basically a whole bunch of folks that wanted you to go to hell and leave the country. Because it's like, oh, these foreigners are coming in and moving into America and causing all sorts of ruckus. They're bringing crime and disease with them, and this is no good. So we gotta rail against them and tell them to go back to where they come from. And it's like, well, these are like white people. And so the people that are mostly focused about racism as in whites versus African Americans and or Latinos or anything like that, they seem to have this is just sort of the latest incarnation of how absurd we sort of treat each other, but we keep changing how absurd we treat each other in order to update to what is bothering us at the time and who can be the scapegoat and who can be who is the minority that we can put all the blames of our own problems and failings on. And it just frustrates me.
Well, it's been pointed out the way that the system of racism perpetuates itself is to continuously expand the in-group whenever either someone gets too upset, but they're not it's not exactly they get too upset. So you have the tiered system. Yeah. The problem is we're running out of tiers right now. It's having problems perpetuating itself because the tiers are breaking down at the moment, which is why you're getting such a strong reaction to everything as we're talking about this. That before you had, your complete in-group, you had white people who already lived in America and were the perfect people.
We're specifically Protestants and, from very specific backgrounds as well.
Then you have, let's just, for simplicity's sake, say you're getting in your Scottish and your Irish immigrants. Now, all of a sudden, they're also an outgroup. They're less of an outgroup than your, Latinas, and they're less of an outgroup than your African Americans. And then, when someone in, say, the Irish group says, this is bad, I don't like this, there's oppression and I'm not getting what I deserve and it's really hard for me, you go, oh, that's because of that Latino guy over there. And
so,
you should go fight them.
So instead of solving the problems, you team up with the people that you're kind of oppressing in order to hurt other groups of people even more.
Well, the promise is, and it sometimes gets fulfilled, that if you start hating these other groups as much as we do, maybe you'll get led into the in-group.
And that's...
The system stays. Who's benefiting from the system migrates over time.
Yes. But there's still this motivation to have somebody, being sort of punished just for who they are. And that sucks.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's an intentional separation so that you can't have class solidarity or other things that would make sense or possibly change anything.
The whole divide and conquer sort of business, which I guess kind of, in the Star Trek world there, the latest outgroup is aliens and things like that. And so maybe there's, still this dynamic going on here, just they're refusing to acknowledge it, but it's still there.
Well, yeah, you only have one alien on the ship. The in-group has expanded to be all of humanity, but it's still just all of humanity. You only have one alien on the ship. He's commented on as if that's unusual. And he's even half human, so you don't even know how they never tell you how any of this functions, which I think is another weird thing, which is how little this show cares about the world that's not directly on the ship.
Yep. There's just kind of planets out there, but they're not important unless we're visiting them.
Yeah, you get so used to, especially the way people talk about Star Trek now, you get very, very used to the idea that this ship exists in a consistent larger universe that we can know things about. But original series doesn't.
sort of a universe upon itself. There is the ship, the Enterprise.
Yeah, the ship is like mostly consistent, and then anything outside can be anything, and it really just depends. It's very Buck Rogers-y sometimes, especially the early stuff. Like the original pilot was, this is a weird Buck Rogers space knights and slave traders world. Yes. With this like one bastion of capitalism coming in to do Americanizing.
I'll become an Orion trader and it'll be all great. And so you're going to be a slaver, Captain Pike? What?
And then you go from that to like the mining, I guess, stays consistent. You go from that to like we have an oppressed working class, but they can get rich if they risk their lives enough. Mm-hmm. You have con men. You have weird traders. You have some sort of civilian bar system happening on outposts. It's all very random. You're never quite sure what's going on off of this ship.
Indeed.
Is it like the old the Le Guin stuff where there's no aliens, all of the planets are just really, really old human colonies? There's some aliens, but there's also really old human colonies that no one knows and no one cares, which I like if they kept that. Like, they don't keep the ship consistent enough. They aren't explicit enough with, like, the ship's the only thing that's consistent. Everything else is just whatever we need to tell this story. But as a thing, like I was saying before, like, the fact that it's inconsistent doesn't bother me. It's just how weirdly the inconsistency kind of... Like, they act like they know this. Like, oh, it's a Federation miner, or it's allied with the Federation. It's like, but your Federation is supposed to be like this bastion of greatness that's, like, making life better for everyone. And you have these weird miners off on an asteroid somewhere almost working themselves to death for a chance at money. That doesn't make any sense.
Mud's woman is just such a... What the hell? But I guess to a certain extent, you know, it is. I guess I'm going to go back to one of the pitches is that whole wagon train to the stars, where in a lot of westerns and things like that, people kind of had a general idea of the mythology already sort of set up, and how it was presented on TV and in literature and other things isn't necessarily connected at all to the realities of the Old West, but it is a mostly consistent sort of fantasy that was very well known at the time. And Star Trek sort of being sort of that sort of next step, this but in the future, kind of has to both abandon but also try to incorporate some elements of that in order to sort of keep the audience sort of understanding what the heck's going on. And I guess to a certain degree, it sort of is a disservice, especially for viewers much later in time that are divorced from that sort of that collection of tropes and ideas there. But I guess to a certain degree, it also kind of helps explain some of these weird things are just kind of happening out there, and yeah. It's like, yeah, of course there's going to be old miners that are going to be risking their lives there, because in the Old West, there is old miners that are risking their lives there for, to try to strike it rich, because that's just what you do in the frontier, I guess.
That is true. It's trying to borrow the inbuilt mythology from another thing when it doesn't have its own inbuilt mythology. It needs to build the mythology, but it's not, because it's trying to just borrow one that doesn't quite fit.
The peg's mostly round, but there's some edges still on it they're trying to whittle off. Which I guess kind of comes, as far as my own writing and things like that goes, is that a lot of what I attempt to do is to sort of diverge quite a bit from how the mythologies are generally accepted, especially in things like Star Trek, by sort of setting up basic premises that are almost alien at the first go, but as I sort of expand upon them, sort of have that humanity kind of come into them, and and it might be a weird situation, the dynamics might be very strange, and I might be playing with very different tropes, but there's going to be, you're going to be sort of exploring a new sort of space. While in Star Trek, they are technically exploring a new set of space here, but they are also using enough of the familiar terrain for folks that they are going to be at times kind of doubling back on stuff that's already been kind of well tread as far as stories and ideas.
Well, I think overall, I was hoping that we'd be able to have like a wrap-up episode where we can go, here's like the philosophy of the show and what it was trying to say. And it's so inconsistent you can't exactly. The consistencies that it's trying to do are that humanity can evolve beyond what we are now and better ourselves. Strikingly at odds with humanity can't evolve or better ourselves.
It wants to push one thing, but is being held back, it seems, by, this is also something that we've assumed, and thus we are unable to push forward fully on the point. And that kind of sucks, honestly. But I guess a good try, especially given, contemporary.
I think it obviously was a pretty good go for the series that it was, because it did get massively popular and it did spawn some other stuff. Though I think if it was just here, if they'd left it here with just this series, I don't know if it would have continued. Like they did this, they tried to do the animated, like they did the animated thing that didn't exactly work. They kept trying to sort of get it back and put it in other incarnations, but I don't know if it actually would have continued and turned into like the massive thing that we know it as today if it had been left with just the TV show. I think that the thing that really cemented it, especially given how much actually transitioned between that and Next Generation, which really kind of cemented Star Trek as this like giant cultural, always has a series running force that we have now, was the movies, which we're going to talk about later. But just briefly, the movies, they came out so much later that the very basic fundamentals of how you shot film and told a story in this format had changed to the point that they fit what they were trying to do better.
Things have kind of evolved by leaps and bounds as far as cinematography, how you characterize people, how you do science fiction in total.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I think they brought in between this and when the movies came out. We're going to do more of the history later, but like you had Star Wars, which fundamentally changed how you shot and thought about science fiction movies. You had the American, the French, I believe it's the French New Wave coming into American cinema, which revolutionized how people thought about and did editing and shot composition. So by the time you go from this very static, not a lot is happening, every now and then somebody figures out that you can do Dutch angles or zooms, but other than that, nothing really is going on, to like what is blatant 2001 / Star Wars ripoffs. Like just the amount of time that passes between, this series, which ends in 69, and then the movies which start coming out, 10 years later. The very fundamentals of storytelling in this format have changed. And I do think that they finally figured out how to do science fiction on screen in the meantime. Star Trek, the original series, is like one of those... so there's this weird era of technology that I just love. It's not really an era of technology, but it's a state of technology when you know that you can do something, but you don't quite have what you need to make it work. So you make something that does it, but in such a weird, janky, not really usable way that it's just this strange little holdover device. It's like the pre-typewriter.
Or the data tapes.
Yeah. There's a thing. What was it called? I'm really blanking on the name now, but there was this like incredibly early sample-based electronic instrument that every key is connected to a looped magnetic tape. So every time you press the keys, it moves the magnetic tape so that that's how it plays the sample. And the thing breaks itself if you don't use it for too long. The playheads stick to the tapes, and the things don't stay tight. Like, the whole thing is held together with spit and dreams.
So you got to keep playing, otherwise you're going to lose your instrument.
So I think original series Star Trek reminds me of that kind of thing. They had an idea, and I think the people who wrote the idea weren't the right people, and the way that film was at the time, especially on TV, wasn't in the right place for it. So it's like that. It's trying to do aspirational storytelling, drama, sci-fi with a strong moral center, but it didn't quite have what it needed to pull it off yet.
So we're giving it a go, but we don't have all the tools we need. So we're just going to make
Which
it
almost makes me appreciate it more.
You know, I guess the term cheesy wasn't sort of in use at this point, but maybe it was. I forget actually. But they are trying so hard, and they're taking it very seriously, even though it's kind of ridiculous what's going on.
I think the only problem that I really hit is I'm not at a place when I'm viewing things where I can really just turn off my brain, especially when I'm watching something to do like something like this where I'm actively going to critique it. So I'm not in a place where I can just turn off my brain and go like, oh yeah, that's an incredibly horrible sexist message that they're deliberately telling people is right. But I mean, the acting's funny.
Shatner's overacting again. Ah. Yeah, and what he's saying is also awful too. Ugh.
So it's just kind of that kind of problem. This is not a show for... Like, if you actually seriously sit down and listen to what they're saying, not what they think they're saying, it's an issue.
I guess in the to sort of sum up to a certain degree is they tried real hard, but they didn't quite have what they needed to pull it off fully.
Well, I think that's probably a good wrap-up. And since we don't have a game show, because that doesn't make any sense...
I can give you an award.
I get no award.
So I'm going to give Gepwin the, we tried that award.
I'm going to give you the You Put Up With My Bullshit award for almost 90 whole episodes.
Yeah, so...
All right, you had some, like, trivia or something to get us off in a lighter area, right?
Little bits here and there. Some of the stuff like, what's people's favorite episodes, that sort of thing. So guess what George Takei's favorite episode was?
Is it Naked Time where he gets to do fencing?
Is, actually.
He got to be shirtless and do fencing.
How about Nichelle Nichols?
Oh, I think I remember that one. Darn, now I can't remember. It's not the one where she sings. Might be Tribbles.
It involves some kissing.
Oh, yeah. Really? Well, I guess that was a big deal at the time.
Yeah, and
the Plato's stepchildren.
It's apparently was her favorite episode there. How about Walter Koenig's?
I'm not sure. I don't know if I could guess that.
So here's a hint. He gets killed during it.
Oh, the Weird Western episode. It's the one he
Spectre
dies
of the Gun.
Yeah.
I have a couple for Shatner. Any guesses on the two that are listed as his favorite?
I don't know. Which ones did we get to take his shirt off the most? Maybe the why am I blanking on the name of that one? The one where he gets to fight Spock in the arena. That might be one.
Nope.
Yeah.
That's not it.
No. One of those weird children one where he got to drag his children on screen?
Don't think so. I don't think there's any children in either of these, really. All right, City on the Edge of Forever.
Okay,
and The Devil in the Dark. Is also one.
Some of the classics. Did he like those before, or did he find out they were fan favorites first?
My list here doesn't have a lot of citations as far as these things go. So for all I know, these could all be wrong. So let's go for DeForest Kelly's favorite episode.
Oh, I hope it's not that Lights of Zatar thing.
Thankfully not.
He got to yell a lot. Maybe,
but it is in season 3.
Is it All Our Yesterdays? No, I can't remember a very McCoy-centric
Well, I will say that it does not involve time travel, but it does involve supernova.
Wait, what was the other supernova? Now I'm blanking on that one. Oh no, not the weird torture
the
one.
empath.
Gem, super gem.
Yeah, it's like, all right, yeah,
Oh,
that's
no.
apparently DeForest Kelly's his favorite episode there. Let's go for James Doohan now.
Okay, that might be Lights of Zatar. So he got to do a lot.
Not quite. This one is also one of my favorites as well. Nope.
Tribbles? Nobody likes Tribbles.
It's one where he does stuff, but he's not a main focus. And there's the ship's in danger, and there's some transporter action.
Well, that's most of them.
I'll just give it to you. It's the Doomsday Machine.
Oh, okay. That one's not too bad.
And Nimoy's has a whole bunch of them listed down. So if you can get any one of them, I'll give it to you.
Well, I know his least favorite episode was Spock's Brain. Well, I'm just curious if Galileo 7 was on his list, because that's the most Spock-centered episode of the thing.
List I got here.
Ah, interesting. So they didn't like the episodes that were written for them?
Well, I'd say that several of the episodes here, he does play a pretty large role, so...
As long as it's not Turnabout Intruder or Savage Curtain, it's probably good. Actually, he might have liked City on the Edge of Forever. That was a very Spock and Kirk-centered episode.
That is on the list here, along with The Naked Time, Journey to Babel, The Devil in the Dark, Amok Time, and This Side of Paradise.
Oof, why that?
You got to act differently, I guess?
Yeah, I guess. He did get a bunch of the ones everyone likes, so I guess there's that.
Now, a bonus round is, Nichelle Nichols has a different answer that she gave for her favorite episode, but it's not the name of an episode.
Oh.
The trick is for this one is the quote is anytime Uhura got off the bridge.
So I can only think of 3. City on the Edge of Forever. She got to be on a set there.
There was that time she got her mind erased. That was horrific, and she was at sickbay for that one.
Also, the Tholian web, she got to run around because she got scared by Ghost Kirk.
I forgot about that. So, I could give you, Roddenberry's list, but it's like 15 episodes here. So, yeah.
All of them.
The Menagerie Part 1 and Part 2, The Enemy Within, The Devil in the Dark, City on the Edge of Forever, Amok Time, Balance of Terror, and so on and so forth.
Well, if we're doing favorites, I guess we should just end on that. So what was your actual favorite of this?
I actually came up with a list here. So do you want me to go with the bad list or the good list first?
Well, let's start with the bad list, I guess. Let's end on a positive note.
Just counting down from 10, the empath, as far as my least favorite ones there, because torture and kind of weird, dewy emotional stuff that gets kind of off-putting. Yeah. 9, Mud's Women, kind of for obvious reasons. The Omega Glory, because apparently this is duplicate Earths is just a thing in this universe, and also this is how apparently future Native Americans are always going to speak. 7, Cat's Paw, because what the hell? 6, The Apple, because you got primitivism plus, let's just sort of ignore the Prime Directive and, upend this entire society. The Paradise Syndrome, sort of similar sort of thing going on there. Spock's Brain is number 4 for me. Really dumb, but I was still kind of entertained, so it's not at the bottom of my list.
Yeah. It was inoffensive, it was just badly made.
Number 3, The Alternative Factor, where it's like, okay, this is badly made and not entertaining. Number 2, Elan of Troyes, is like, oh, yeah, Kirk's slapping the lady around, that's not cool. And Turnabout Intruder, kind of for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
So that's the depressing list there.
I can't think of much that you didn't include.
Yeah, there's still some that are kind of close there, or we're just kind of meh overall, or like, well, there's some good stuff going on here, but there's some really bad elements here too. That's we're kind of, I guess, close to my list there, but they didn't quite make it.
I think my like full. I think you're like. I don't know. I didn't order anything, but I don't think I have much that wasn't on yours. I think my standout dislike, like full on dislikes, were like Clone Kirk,
Oh yeah,
evil
The
Clone
Enemy
Kirk.
Within.
Yeah, it's like basically anyone where they sexually assault someone and then justify it afterward, which was too many
I think
of
that
them.
one would be like my number 11. No, close to my list, but just shy.
And then obviously Turnabout Intruder is the worst because it's badly made and promoting a horrible message.
That just kind of is awful. Let's just pretend that episode didn't end the series, and we'll just do with ended it all yesterday.
Yeah, which still wasn't great, but
It was better though. It's better than Turnabout Intruder. Should I move on to my good list?
yeah, why not?
All right. So my, once again, because this, not all of these are going to be 100% amazing things forever, but they are the ones that I found myself appreciating more than the rest. Number 10, Journey to Babel. Some interesting character stuff going on. Introduction to like this is actually a federation with a bunch of aliens. That was pretty cool, and maybe not the most well put together plot overall, but still kind of interesting.
Yeah, basically the only time it did what you think of as Star Trek.
Number 9 is the Enterprise incident. It's like, okay, there's some, it's basically spy stuff on Star Trek and done like halfway decently. There's still a few quirky things, but overall, that was kind of an interesting thing going on. Number 8, the Corbinite maneuver, where Kirk realizes, oh, maybe I need to think about this in a way other than what I was expected. It's all like, I'm going to have some character development here, and that's going to be good. Also, these aliens are kind of spooky. I think that's, the Corbinite maneuver, I guess, is also the ones that kind of stuck with me from, like, when I was much younger. And it's like, yeah, this episode's, like, freaking me out, man.
Yeah, I could see that if I'd watched it when I was a kid.
It's like, this is just kind of creepy. And I kind of, and rewatching that, it's like, it just kind of reminded me of that. And so I guess that it's maybe not, going to be an objective standard at all, but I kind of appreciated having that sort of flashbacks to my younger days. My number 7 is The Trouble with Tribbles, because it's just kind of fun. The number 6 is The Cloudminders. It's like, wow, we're actually like trying to like do a message, and it's kind of working for once. 5 is The City on the Edge of Forever. We've already talked at length about some of the flaws in that, but there's still some good stuff going on. Number 4 is The Doomsday Machine, because like I kind of like just like sometimes it's good just to have a random space adventure where it's like, okay, we're going to have some people are going to be reacting to this thing, and we have the main cast reacting differently to this thing, and they're trying to figure out a solution. And this is very, very Star Trek as far as like sort of the monster of the week, sort of problem of the week sort of thing. Which, I kind of like there. Number 3 for me is The Devil in the Dark, because it's very much once again kind of a very Star Trek episode where it's like, okay, we got a situation where we don't know what's going on, and there's apparently a monster, but we can actually like find the humanity in this very inhuman sort of thing, and come to terms and make peace and be happy and all live together in harmony, that kind of stuff. That's and so good message at the end, and very kind of atmospheric getting up to there too. So despite all the kookiness and cheap sets. My number 2 is Balance of Terror. Once again, still has some flaws in it, but is very much a good submarines in space sort of adventure. And my number 1 is probably shouldn't be too much a surprise given I've gushed about it previously. A Taste of Armageddon, and just watch that episode, or listen to that episode if you want to hear me talk about that. So, you got any additions to for your own good list?
Like, I don't think there was anything that you didn't have. I think that I enjoyed Cloudminders more as like a number 1 because they actually like tried to solve things. It was an actual someone's trying to ignore, and we have to talk about what we should do. And that was one of the episodes where they actually sat down and talked about stuff for a minute.
And that was great.
So there were 1 or 2 where they actually sat down and discussed whether they should do a thing. That was always like Kurt going, yeah, we should do it, and screw anyone who doesn't want to. But
it's like, I have to bend everyone to my will. And the Cloudminder's like, So we should like figure out a plan here. Like, what do you guys think?
I think some of the only things were like, I was always a little disappointed, and maybe I wasn't just letting myself go and giving it more of a chance on things. I was just too bothered by the inherent sexism in a lot of these episodes. But a lot of the classics that you have, like City on the Edge of Forever and things, like there was just too much of that stuff that bugged me to be able to just get into the episode.
And yeah, as I said, a lot of these still have their flaws, like all the sexism. I guess just sort of in comparison to other episodes of the series as well, given there's just so much sexism, that it's kind of like, all right, well, this one and this one have the sexism, but they have these 15 other things that I do like, but still the sexism. But that does mean that they're doing better than the one with the 2 things I like and the 15 things I don't like.
That's true. But still, overall, I see where it's going. If I didn't know where this show was going, I don't think I would have liked the series overall. It's just too much. Like, compared to other things at its time, I think it's probably one of the better shows, so I see why it resonated with people. But definitely looking at it from a more modern lens, it's just kind of, no.
I sometimes I watch older episodes of like Doctor Who as well, and sometimes it runs into a similar problem, especially on the racial stuff. And it's like, well, that's not great. But still, I know where the things have taken since then, and can be like, all right, well, I can. This is the warts, and they are going to be slowly removed over time, and hopefully we can keep making things that are better and more amazing, and using this as a kickoff point. It might be awkward and uncomfortable at times, but it's still sort of the root of something that is people still are being entertained by today. And that's much less awful.
It's probably only gonna get better from here, I hope.
So I guess as far as like series goes, what are we going to be covering next, Gepwin?
Yeah, so we're gonna have our normal little break between seasons. Somewhere in there, we're gonna have our intermediary episode where we'll cover a movie or something. We don't have that quite worked out yet, so we're gonna take a little time. And then after that, instead of going straight to anything anyone's interested in, we're going to go through the 22 episodes of Star Trek the Animated Series.
Holy smokes, you mean there was another Star Trek episode that was animated and like all cartoony before the Lower Decks, which just came out a little bit ago?
Yeah, which it's fairly weird. There was an original animated show, which actually chronologically did come out between this and like the first movie. And
here's a little bit of the spoilers. There is a lot of cheap animation.
Yeah, I mean,
using
it's
monsters,
really cheap,
but more non-humanoid creatures. But also apparently magic works.
Oh, fun. I mean, we've hit that in other. That's the thing in Next Gen.
Yeah, but I mean, like Spock's going to cast a magic spell now, so everyone hold back and stay back.
Okay, that's fun. We'll get into more later. This is a series that ran for 1-ish year between 1973 and 1974.
So technically 2 seasons, but like the second one's like 6 episodes or something like that.
Yeah, it's only 22 episodes across 2 seasons. So yeah, it's only 6 episodes in season 2 and 16 in season 1. So it's going to be a much shorter series than this.
We'll probably treat it as just 1 season and go whole all the way through it. Also, if I remember correctly, half-hour episodes?
I believe so, yeah. I actually have never seen a single episode of this. I've seen parodies. I've seen at least one really juvenile parody music video that uses the animation from this show. But other than that, I know absolutely nothing about this, except for it supposedly has one of the best written episodes of anything involving original series. At least according to the person who wrote it.
Might be even the first episode of the series, too, oddly enough.
Is it? Let's see. That's not the one that I heard of.
It's the one with Spock time travels, and there's the Guardian of Forever again.
Oh, that's not the one that I heard of, so that could be something to look forward to.
Oh, hooray!
The one that...
You're not thinking about the Infinite Vulcan, are you?
No, I'm thinking of How Sharper Than a Serpent's Tooth, which apparently is in season 2.
Oh yeah, I heard that one's pretty good too, yeah.
But we'll see. I heard a lot of the original series was good.
Yeah, so we'll see how that rolls.
All right, so that's it for original series, and I guess technically season 1 of Watches of Tomorrow, as far as podcast seasons go anyway.
Yeah, so I think it's maybe time for me to quote something from Dark City. Shut it down! Shut it down forever!
Okay, everybody. Thanks for joining us in this little retrospective episode.
Wait a moment, Gepwin. There's one last thing before we go. We sign off fully. Because we got a question.
We got a question?
Yes, we got a question.
I didn't even see the question.
Yes. So Chris Sway asks, regarding the game show portion of the podcast, are contestants taxed on their winnings?
Contestants are taxed to their local jurisdiction, and if they want to take out, they always have available the full cash equivalent of any prize value they're given. Though some of them are kind of abstract, so I don't know what the cash equivalency of some of those would be.
So sometimes it's I'm going to give them a clue. All right, how much is that worth in gold press latinum? But yeah, so that's all the questions we've got. So
okay. Well, now that that's over with, yeah, nobody wanted to ask anything. But we'll come back later, like I said, animated series, movie, etc. Thank you for joining us here this week on Watches of Tomorrow.
Next time on Watchers of Tomorrow, I don't know, some sort of thing? I don't know. You have been listening to Watchers of Tomorrow, a podcast on science fiction media. Find and follow Watchers of Tomorrow on Podbean, YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Pocket Cast, Spreader, Digital Podcast, and perhaps many more to come. If you enjoy our podcast, make sure to subscribe for more. And where possible, make sure to rate your experience or leave us a review. You may find Gepwin on youtube.com/Gepwin and Twitter @Gepwin. You may find me, Dr. Isix, on youtube.com/Dr. Isix and Twitter @IsixLP. Music is Waveform and Mori's Principle, both by DRKRN. You can also check out the Watchers of Tomorrow Discord channel. Make sure to share the experience with your friends, family, enemies, and alien overlords. If you feel you are suffering from transporter syndrome, please be aware that the next time you step off the transporter, that you, that is now, no longer exists.